All right, Matt, we've been doing some quick Nationals offseason videos on Instagram, and I thought it might be worth it to take a deeper dive on their offseason, which I think is kind of an interesting point in this rebuilding process because they made some progress last year, but now they got to keep that going, right? So this is kind of a big offseason for them. And I also wanted to build off your excellent newsletter called The Local 9. Any Nats fans out there who have not yet subscribed, make sure you do that. If you give Matt his email, he'll give you a weekly newsletter. He won't steal your identity either. I promise that. So Matt, speaking of the Nats offseason, the other day I was talking to my dad as we were watching the Commanders lose to the Giants, and he pointed out how a lot of teams in DC are in last place right now and through different stages of a rebuild. And I countered that by saying, well, what about the Nats? They had a 16-game improvement last year. They've also got Mike Rizzo in charge. I feel like they're a little bit different. And he countered that by saying, well, they still only won 71 games. They still haven't really found any stars. There's no certified building blocks. So my question for you is this. How would you describe the current state of the Nats rebuild at this moment in time?
Yeah, it's a complex question, and I think your dad is on to a few things there. The big question, I think, when you talk about any rebuild is who can you count on, right? By the time the team is ready to contend, who on the current roster do you know will be a big part of that championship contending club? And right now, the Nationals have a lot of question marks. Don't get me wrong. There were some breakout seasons in 2023. C.J. Abrams in the stolen base department for sure, and it looks like all the parts of a leadoff hitter that the Nationals can bank on for a few years. Keibert Ruiz, with his team-friendly extension, looks like somebody who can hold down the position behind the plate. Mackenzie Gore, Josiah Gray, potential pitchers out of the rotation, guys who have flashed plenty of upside, but also shown question marks as well. Nobody has reached the star status. I was looking at the career arc of Garrett Cole, and Garrett Cole kind of got off to a slow start to his career and then really solidified himself around his age 24 or 25 season as a potential ace, as a franchise player for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, the Pirates didn't end up building a contending team, but he did his part in becoming a world-class player. And the Nationals really don't have a player who you can really say is in that echelon, somebody for them to truly build around. So they're going to need a lot of players, a lot of things to work out their way. So I'd say heading into this offseason, 2023, 2024, there's still a lot of question marks, and there's still a lot of things that you need to kind of see through before you can really start building towards the potential playoff appearance.
Now, all that being said, I do think there's some reason for at least cautious optimism because there is forward momentum, and it didn't take multiple years of losing 100 games to get here. Like, just compare it to the Orioles, our friends up I-95. They had to lose 100 games 3 times before they became a 500 team and then became a playoff team. The Nationals lost 100 games once. So if they can keep it going, Nats fans may be spared from that years-long malaise of watching essentially terrible baseball. And they're only one step away from having, I think, a truly competitive team. You win 71 games, you win 10 more next year, that's a 500 team. That means you're winning every other night. And as long as you're not a team that expects to win 100 games and then you disappoint as a 500 team, that could be a pretty entertaining season to watch. So I don't think they're that far away, but obviously they got to continue to take steps forward. But I think it also all comes back to Rizzo for me. Like, I think if you're a Nationals fan, you have to have some confidence in the fact that Rizzo has done it before. And sort of a calling card of their previous era as contenders was him always being able to find replacements, always being able to find young players. So as long as he can continue that success, I think the Nationals should be just fine. Speaking of Rizzo, I think he's going to have to toe an interesting line this offseason when it comes to bolstering their lineup. Because obviously they need help. Last year they were 21st in the majors in runs scored, 29th in homers, and 21st in OPS. So clearly it's an issue. But you also have all these young position player prospects coming through the ranks. So how much should they add to their position player group this offseason, knowing that you don't want to block the path of those guys?
Yeah, one more note on the record there. They did win 71 games, but going 28-21 in one-run games, 6-2 in extra innings, it does make that jump, 16 wins, a little bit of a mirage, if you ask me. So I would say that the Nationals do want to continue to build off of that and increase their win total once again. in 2024, they are going to need to continue to add pieces. It is certainly not going to only come from what they have within. Now, that being said, as you say, they can't just block these guys. They have a lot of young talent, particularly in the outfield, coming up through the system. They have Lane Thomas entrenched in an outfield spot, but he's just about the only guy that you can count on out of the gate. Maybe you bring in another stopgap outfielder. Brady House is going to come up and play third base probably, if not next season, then the year after. So you don't want to entrench somebody there at third too much, but potential stopgaps there, I think would make a lot of sense. Guys on one-year deals, guys who are looking to rebuild their value, I think could come to DC and really get an opportunity to play for at least 1 year until these guys are ready. If you're looking to make some long-term investments, I think the two places you got to do it are middle infield, where C.J. Abrams might be holding down shortstop for a while, but second base is still a major question mark. I'm not certainly not sold on Luis Garcia from what we've seen so far. And then starting pitching. You can never have too much starting pitching. And I think as the Nationals showed during their previous run of contention from 2012 to 2019, you can build up your team with a lot of position players like their organization is right now and buy pitching. We want to bring in big free agents who are ready to contend right away, ready to pitch big innings for you right away. It's a lot easier to find that, I think, on the open market than to develop it yourself.
I personally think they could use some power bats, especially in their infield. They've already shown the ability to play with speed. Last year they were 12th in stolen bases. But they need to hit a lot of home runs, a lot more home runs. Last season, I know it's an extreme example because the Braves had a historically good offense, but the Braves hit more than twice as many homers as the Nats. And seemingly every year, especially in this era, if you look at the teams that hit the most home runs, they're usually very good teams, right? This year, it was the Braves, Dodgers, Twins, Rangers, Angels, Rays, Astros, Phillies. The Angels were the only outlier there. Like every other team was good, and a lot of those teams made deep playoff runs. Of course, the Rangers won it all. So I think the Nats need to find about 60 to 75 home runs to rank among the best offenses in the league. And if you break that down by position, it's a handful of homers per spot in the lineup. So I think they need to find a lot more power if they want to have an elite offense. And obviously, homers are king, especially in this day and age. But what is also an obvious need for the Nats, and perhaps a more obvious need, is their pitching. As you mentioned, their pitching staff was not great top to bottom last year with few exceptions. And unlike their lineup, they don't have a bunch of blue chip prospects coming through the ranks. So, Matt, my question to you is this. If you could add 2 pitchers in free agency this winter, who would they be?
Yeah, I'll give you two names here that one I've been looking at probably since the middle of this past season as a potential target, and one that just popped up and became available thanks to some non-tendering decisions. The first is Frankie Montas. Montas coming off of some major injuries with the Yankees, but prior to his trade over to New York was a beast for Oakland for several years. One of the better pitchers in the American League over the past few seasons prior to this run of injuries. So I think he's a great bounce-back candidate for the Nats to give on a one-year deal, somebody who has shown ace upside in the past and could come in and be, not just a veteran guy, but somebody who can also provide some innings for a rotation that has a lot of young arms that don't have a consistent track record of going deep into games and staying healthy for an entire season. The other one, Brandon Woodruff. Brandon Woodruff, another guy who ran into some injury trouble this past season, surprisingly, in my opinion, non-tendered by the Milwaukee Brewers, but is a Cy Young contender when he's at his best and still towards the end of his prime right now. I think he's going to command a good amount of money for a one-year deal, but as he looks to rebuild his value as well, I think those are two guys who have the upside, but also potentially could have a higher floor given what we have seen from them as long as they're able to stay healthy.
Those are good picks. I also have 2. I don't know if they're the sexiest choices because they're relief pitchers, but I'll go with Nick Martinez, who pitched the last 2 years to the Padres as a starter/reliever, a very versatile pitcher who last year began the season as a starter, then was a reliever for most of the season, and then was a starter at the end of the season. He can come in and give you an inning of relief. He can be a long reliever. And he had a 3.4 ERA the last 2 years. And he's a guy who went overseas and then came back and just had his best 2 seasons. And he's 33, he's going to his mid-30s. I think he might be the type of guy who figured it out late and still presents some upside. And Fangraphs projects him to make around $9 million a year on his next deal. He had a team/player option in San Diego. He was due to make $8 million. He declined that, so he's probably going to make a little bit more than that. But I think given all that he does, I think it could be worth that price. I also like lefty reliever Brent Suter, who last year played in Colorado at Coors Field, and he had a 3.3 ERA in 57 appearances. Fangraphs expects him to make around $4.7 million a year. And as a lefty who has been very good for a while, I think he could help stabilize the Nats bullpen while doing so at not a very hefty price. But speaking of pitchers, I wanted to ask you about a much more high-profile name, and that is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. For Nats fans who have not heard about him, he's the latest pitching phenom to come through the ranks in Japan. We all know they've produced some great pitchers over the years. He just posted free agency. He's coming off 3 Sawamura Awards, which is the equivalent of the Cy Young in Japan. He's also won 2 MVPs. He's going to be in high demand, but should the Nats be interested?
I'm a firm believer that you don't invest in pitching until you are ready to contend, right? If you're going to give a 7-year deal to a guy who is coming up on his age 28, 29 season, yes, he might be one of the best pitchers in baseball right now, but that is a tight window that you need to capitalize when you're handing out those kinds of contracts. So you need to make sure that your team is ready to absorb that kind of contract and capitalize on the biggest window that you have while it's open. That being said, Yamamoto is only 25 years old. I think that this is a prime opportunity for the Nationals to, if they are ready to invest, if ownership is truly ready to start building this team up for contention once again. This is something where you can bring him in now, and even if the Nationals aren't ready this year, at least you have him in place when they are ready, and he's still just entering the middle of his prime. So I love Yamamoto. I think he's a player who has shown he can show up on some of the biggest stages, both in the playoffs, in the Japanese League, and the World Baseball Classic. He's electric. I mean, we've seen time and time again, Japan is able to produce these ace caliber pitchers. So I think that he might be the exception to that rule.
Well, at some point, we know the Nats are going to have to invest in some pitching, right? They've got a lot of position player prospects that are coming up. We think a lot of them are going to be very good, but we know Mike Rizzo and his MO, and maybe his philosophy's changed a little bit over the years, but he was still with the Diamondbacks when they won a World Series based around pitching, and we all know that pitching was very important to the Nationals in 2019. So at some point along the way, Mike Rizzo is going to go after some pitchers that are probably going to have to come from outside the organization at this rate. So maybe it's in free agency, and maybe someone like that is a player that you could sign. Even if it's a year or two early, it still makes sense for your timeline. So final topic here. The Nats have a group of former prospects that includes Victor Robles, Luis Garcia, Carter Kieboom, Yoan Adon, and Mason Thompson. Which of those guys would you like to see get another chance at a key role?
Yeah, I think that there's still a lot of untapped potential in that group, guys who are still only 23, 24, 25 years old and have the potential to still reach the potential that the Nationals saw in them over these last couple of years as they were coming up in the farm system. But the one guy that stands out to me and really just impresses me every time I watch him is Mason Thompson. I know that he has had some control issues in the past, but when he is dialed in, I mean, he's hitting triple digits. He's throwing some of the best fastballs on the team. They have movement. He's got some decent off speed. I think, honestly, pitch selection has been a big problem for him, and sometimes I think he'll overthrow just too much. And leave some balls over the plate or throw them too wild. So I'd love to see him get a chance to be a setup man or even a closer for the Nationals at some point next season. They're going to enter the season at least with Kyle Finnegan, Hunter Harvey, and Tanner Rainey coming off of Tommy John as guys who are going to be relied on for key roles in that bullpen. But I still think that Mason Thompson has what it takes to be one of those guys and really be part of that mix moving forward.
I'll pick two of them. I'll say Carter Kieboom and Mason Thompson. Anyone who listened to the Nationals Talk podcast back in the day knows that I've always been a Carter Kieboom guy, and I was wrong, but I still think he's got a chance. I still think there's a little bit of potential there, and really for me it goes back to what I said I think is a need, which is power bats in the infield, and that's in theory what he can do, right? That's what he did in the minor leagues. I agree on Mason Thompson. The fact that he throws hard, I think, suggests that there's upside there. And we all know good bullpens around the league. They tend to have a lot of guys who can come in and pump 95, 96. And he could do that. And he was pretty good in 2022. It's a small sample size. Obviously, he wasn't able to carry that over into last season, but maybe the Nationals can figure out his control issues, and because he's got something that you can't teach, which is a high-octane fastball. All right, Matt, this has been fun. Maybe we should do this again, later in the offseason when the Nats actually make some moves and we have something to talk about. Once again, Nationals fans out there who have not yet subscribed to the Local 9 Matt's weekly newsletter, make sure you do that. It is very informative and also free, so that's good. Thank you for watching, everyone.